Okay, so hello. We're going to get started for today. So today we're talking about interview tips for virtual and face-to-face. And the basic agenda of the workshop is that we're going to kind of take it to before the interview, during the interview, and after. And within that, we're going to talk about things that could be both for anything, for in-person or virtual, and then some of it are specifically for either. And then we're going to delve a little bit deeper for some areas for the during the interview, such as how to answer certain questions, how to what questions to ask, and just how to handle certain situations as well. So let me go on. Okay. So what we're going to talk about initially is before the interview. So one of the key things before the interview is obviously to know yourself. So you want to know why you're interested in this position, how you're a fit for this position, why you applied, to know the job. So as much as you can. So obviously you apply to a position. So if you had a description, if you can look further into that through research into both the job title itself, but that specific job at that organization, and know the organization. So that's really key too. You want to know where you're interviewing, what their mission is, what they value. They are looking for candidates who are fit not only with their job, but their organization. So that is really key. And there's a lot of ways you can research an organization. You can research obviously just through their own media, through their website, through their social media, but then through different sites, through LinkedIn, through reviews on them, through places like Glassdoor, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So you definitely want to kind of do that work. And employers really want to know a few things. So they want to know, can you do the job? Of course. They want to know, do you have the skills that we need? Do you have the ability to learn the skills we need you to learn? Can you do this particular job? They also want to know, will you do the job? What is your willingness to do this type of job? How has past performance been? And this can be judged through different behavioral questions. And they really want to know, do you want the job? And I think this is an area that gets missed sometimes. Is this motivation? Is this motivation for applying for this job? Why this job? Why are you interested? Is this just because it fits certain pay or certain location? Or is it because this is a job you really want at an organization you're really interested in? They want to see that. And will you fit in? And fit does matter. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So don't get stopped by the basics. So this is key. So obviously we're going to discuss these throughout the workshop, but things like lateness, distractions, dress, not doing the research. And as I kind of go again, do your research. I mean, this is really key. I think most fumbles in an interview happen if you don't know the organization you're applying for. Now, with that said, I don't want you to think you need to know everything about the organization. You will not. You don't work there. But enough to show that you did enough research beyond just looking at their website for 5 minutes, So this can really help you feel more comfortable, and it can help take some nerves away too, if you've done your research. So a tip I have is, if you haven't been on Glassdoor, Glassdoor is a really great website that has different types of reviews in all different parts of organizations, including interviewing. This is, I would say, better for larger organizations because it's kind of crowdsourced, and it's free to use Glassdoor. The way you get full access is that if you review something. So let's say you worked somewhere and you could either review their interview questions or about the job or their benefits or really anything. This gives you access, and people will talk about the questions that they were asked on an interview. Another thing to do before the interview is to practice. So you can practice, if it's going to be something like a video interview, you could even do kind of like what I'm doing now. I'm presenting a workshop, but I could use Zoom just to kind of practice with myself and see how I look. So, there's really different ways to practice. You can also make an appointment with the career counselor at the Career Development Center. Obviously right now that would be over Zoom, and do a mock interview. We also have a resource called Interview Stream you can access on our website. And that gives you access like thousands of interview questions. You can create your own interview set and record yourself answering kind of pre-recorded questions. And then you can share that with somebody and they can review that with you. Are there any questions so far? Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. We good? Okay. Sorry, it's funny. I'm looking that way because I have two screens. So my face is over there. I realize that now. See, it's good I'm practicing. Okay, so let's talk about before the interview, but focus more on video or phone and some of the extra things that come into play here. So obviously things like testing your mic, speakers, camera on the platform before you interview. Now, of course, it all depends, right? So they are inviting you to an interview. They're going to send you a link before, but you can before, I mean, even test it, make sure you don't need to install any software. You know, most likely, you know, I would say the biggest ones we're seeing now for video are Zoom, WebEx, you know, there's Google Meets, but it really kind of depends on what that organization is using. So, and most definitely test, make sure your mic and speakers are working, test your camera, see what it looks like. Pick the right location. You know, obviously this isn't always simple, right? Especially right now, you may have an interview, but other people in your household may also be home, either not working or working from home, or, you know, you could be living in any sort of situation. So sometimes distraction-free is a little hard, but if you can, try to find a distraction-free setting that you could have at least for this like half an hour for the interview. For lighting, so like right now, I'm in natural light. I'm lucky that we have 2 windows in here, and I think it looks nice with the natural light. Maybe there's a little bit of glare on my face. But, you know, you really kind of want to make sure you have the right light that they can see you well. And checking beforehand how your camera looks helps with this a lot. Obviously, ensure that you have a stable internet connection. You know, if you're at your home, you probably already know this because you're using it every day. You know, make sure, you know, if there are others in your household, maybe they can kind of lay off some things while you're interviewing, whether it's a lot of, you know, video watching going on or other video calls and things like that. I will say that it is best on a computer, like laptop or desktop or tablet. It's much harder to do the interview on a phone. So as much as you can get access to this, that would be better. So definitely like for a computer, you know, just close any unnecessary tab software. Again, you want it to just be focusing on the interview. If using a phone, just make sure your camera's at a good angle. You kind of prop it up on a book if needed to play with it a little bit too. You know, have a pen next to you. You could take any notes, you know, because typing could be a distraction. You know, so they could definitely hear it. So if you want to take some quick notes, it's good to have that. If you are doing, you know, a video interview, so like you could create reminder notes to help you with questions. So this is taking advantage of that video interview. So you can, like, around your screen, up a little post-it so they won't see it. So you're trying to making sure that they're out of sight. Now, if you're on a phone interview, you could have something right in front of you because they're not seeing you as well. But don't go crazy, meaning don't write an answer to every single interview question you've thought of, because then that's just going to be a distraction. But there's certain things, you know, you want to remember to say. You could have some notes around. And then really, you know, grab a bottle of water to have next to you for the interview. You know, it's just, you're talking a lot depending on the interview. It's just one less thing you have to worry about. Any questions? Let me see. Anything in the chat? We good? Okay. I'm going to go on to the next. Okay. So your interview look. So in person and video. So you really want to think about what you're going to wear to the interview. So you do want to dress a step or two better than how you would look on the job. So for example, there are many jobs where you may, you know, be pretty casual. So I know people who are in professional jobs who wear jeans every day. But that doesn't mean necessarily that you'd want to interview in jeans. But you also really want to know the industry and the organizational culture, because there may be some jobs where everyone will tell you like wear a suit to your interview, but there may be some positions where that would also be looked down upon, and maybe that's really so much out of what that culture is. Maybe you should have worn just a nice pair of pants or a skirt and a blazer or a sweater. It's you really kind of want to know the industry and the organizational culture, but really also remembering that it's an interview. What's nice is that if you're interviewing at a larger organization, even not as large as you think, sometimes you're working directly with HR, and they're the ones who are kind of setting up everything for your interviews. So if you have that like human resources rep you're working with, they can also kind of be someone you're asking questions to, because they're not interviewing, right? They're just more coordinating interviews, especially if this is past, let's say, an initial screening. They could be a nice place for information if you have questions about things like this. So for a video interview, dress as if you were going to an in-person interview. Just everywhere. I'm not, first of all, it's going to put you in the place mentally that you're at an interview, but also you're on camera and you just never know if you're going to have to step up and fix something, close the blinds, check something, so you want to be in that interview dress. So be neat. So like limit jewelry, piercings, if you're in person, perfumes. And the main thing is that you're trying to eliminate your own distractions as well as just their distractions. So you see the image on the bottom. If we have time later, I'll play this ridiculous commercial. It's from a number of years ago. It's basically, he's on an interview, but he has a stain on his shirt, and the stain is screaming the whole time and drowning out his questions. So that's why you really want to just make sure that everything is focused on you. I also said know your own distractions. So like for me, maybe not as much now because it's short, but like I would just play with my hair as a nervous habit. So I knew for interviews that I would need to put my hair back, or I would just constantly play with it. So know what your own distractions are and try to make that not an obstacle for you. You really want them, as I said again, to focus on what you are saying. And I'm definitely happy to answer any questions about, dress for particular types of interviews too. So any questions right now? Chat. No? Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide and have some water. Okay, so interview day. So arrive on time. So of course, obviously, but what does on time mean? So usually 10 minutes early is appropriate for an in-person interview. 5 minutes early is appropriate for a video interview. And for a phone interview, you should be getting the call from those who are interviewing you. But you do really kind of want to be waiting. And I would say this, if you have a phone interview, really give yourself a cushion that you could start that interview 15 minutes early or 15 minutes late. Just from my own experience, usually if you're having a phone interview, you're not the only one having a phone interview that day, and they're doing a series of calls. And sometimes they may be running late because of candidates, those interviews going long, and other times there may have a no-show, and they may even try to call you a little early to see if you could start the interview then. So give yourself that cushion when selecting the interview time. So really think beyond the interviewer. So be respectful and friendly to everyone in the process. And I say that in a way, like, of course, I think you're going to be friendly to everyone and respectful, but sometimes we're nervous. And especially in person, right? You may be walking into a building and then walking into an office and dealing with other people, and you're just so focused on getting into the interview. So it's really just kind of realizing that for an in-person interview, the second you step into whatever that is, that building, that place, that, campus, wherever you're interviewing, you're on the interview. Phone video is a little different, but you may be interacting with people virtually, whether it's via email, phone, who are helping you with the process, who are not interviewing you. And again, really interview day, remove distractions. So my recommendation is to totally silence your phone, turn off data Wi-Fi, ensure no notifications are coming in. Because think about how many times you've thought you like silenced your phone, but then like why is this sound coming in? Because there's just so many different levels of sound. For video phone, really try to find that quiet place and let those you live with or whoever you're around know that you will be interviewing. Okay, any questions? Okay, so during the interview. So right now I'm going to hit on just some very brief points of during the interview, but we will be delving deeper into some areas in the next few slides. So during the interview, really be aware of your verbal and nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is also important in a video interview, right? Maybe not as much in a phone interview, but definitely in a video interview too. So even right now, like I'm still talking with my hands and, you could all see that on camera. So just know what your tendencies are too. I tend to talk really fast, so I really have to kind of consciously think of slowing down my speech. And I may be talking faster in a phone conversation or video. So that is really, something you can like practice with as well. It could really be as simple as, getting on a quick Zoom with a friend before your interview and just saying, how do I sound? How am I talking? How are my nonverbals? Or a phone, whatever the interview will be. And obviously in person, both verbal and nonverbal are very important too. So you see, I say always have an answer for behavioral questions. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But what I really mean by this is you're often asked these situational questions in an interview. So tell me about a time when, right? You had to solve a problem, you faced a challenge, you had difficulty with a coworker, a project you had failed. You really can't say, it's hard for those questions to not have an example for, because we've all faced challenges. We've all worked on a project, right? So for these, you may want to have some examples in the bank, and we'll talk a little bit more about that you can pull from. So even if they asked you a behavioral question that you really is very hard to answer because you haven't really had experience. So tell me about a time you've had a difficulty with a coworker and how that was resolved. Well, maybe you're fortunate that you've never had difficulty with a coworker. So you wouldn't just say, I haven't had difficulty with a coworker. You say, I've really been fortunate that I've communicated well with my coworkers and we've always been able to talk to each other. And if there are any issues our manager can help us out. So you're still kind of giving an example about what you have done. And then you could go a little bit further to say what you would do in that situation. With that, the flip side is you don't always have to have an answer for a factual question if you don't know. And what I mean by that is if somebody says to you, do you know what this is? And you don't, honesty is probably better. Have you used this software? Do you know what this software is? And you're like, wow, I've never heard of that. You can say, well, you could say like, well, actually I haven't heard of that. Can you tell me more about it? Or let's say it's a piece of equipment that you know about, let's say lab equipment, but you haven't had experience with. You could say, I know a bit about it, but I haven't had experience, but I'm really kind of quick to learn new technology. But again, you really do want to be honest with that. So often during an interview, when you're asked questions, sometimes they can be a few parts, they could be long. And it's really okay to ask them to repeat the question or paraphrase it back to them if you're unsure of what they're asking. And that is perfectly fine. And I would say especially on a phone interview too, when you don't have that facial, where you're not looking at someone, that can make it a little harder as well. And even with phone or video, with the quality, you can always ask, and in person as well. And then ending your answer. So when you feel you've answered, you probably have. I think sometimes issues I see with working with people who are practicing interviewing is like they're having this battle in their head. Like, did I answer the question? I think I answered the question. you're kind of having this conversation with yourself while you're still answering the question. So if you feel like you've answered it, you could just end and ask, you can like, did that answer your question, right? Because they will be honest if you didn't answer their question. They will say, well, actually, can you expand on this a little bit for me? Any questions right now? No. Okay, I'm gonna go on. Okay, so let's talk a little about during the interview, phone and video, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about delving a little bit deeper into questions. So obviously, as I already mentioned, speak slowly and clearly, make sure you're in a quiet room, maintain eye contact with the camera and sit in the right spot. So it's very funny. So I'm being a poor example of this now because I have my camera so where I could see myself on a different screen because it blocks my text of the presentation. So right now I moved it, so I'm looking at myself and the camera. But when I move it back to my other screen, I'm doing this a little bit, right? And you're probably seeing that. Now I'm not on an interview, and I'm probably going to keep it on the other screen because then it blocks my PowerPoint. But it is good though during a video interview that not only like are you looking at the camera, but whatever that video back of you you're seeing is in front of you too, because we tend to look at ourselves. So you kind of want to make sure if you do have two screens that it's all there. So for phones, definitely avoid using the speakerphone. Definitely using headphones with a microphone that has good sound quality is good. And even for video, unless you have a really good external mic on your whatever device you're using, computer, tablet, you're probably going to get a better quality of sound if you're using good quality like headphones and mic too. And it really also helps if you are at a place with other people, if you're if you're at your home, but there's 4 other people there, having headphones, even like, regular earbuds or headphones like this really helps just drown that out too. So use your face to show you're engaged, right? So on a video, you are still just like that in person, really. You're smiling, you're acknowledging. This is all part of your nonverbal communication. Now, phone obviously is harder since, you can't see, even if you show this engagement, because naturally it's how you're talking, you're not seeing facial reactions from others. So that does make phone a little bit harder. Make sure the person talking is done before you answer. This happens all the time now. I'm seeing in video calls, because sometimes there's even like a drop of a delay. And yeah, so we're definitely I've just been noticing it in meetings too. So it's kind of taking that moment to make sure that other person is done speaking. And really don't panic over technical issues, just explain what's happening. So if you're having trouble hearing them, if there's an issue with your camera or your mic, now remember, like, you also have the chat as a feature for most places where you would be doing a video interview. So let's say something happens and you suddenly can't hear them, you could say it and you can type it in the chat, right? But I will guarantee you that recruiters that are using video, phone are used to having issues even prior to COVID, because most initial interviews were over phone. So it's just kind of letting them know what the issues are. And as I kind of mentioned before, it's also using these platforms to your advantage, right? Like I was saying with the video or the phone, I could have notes here that you wouldn't see. You're maybe in a more relaxed environment, right? You're more comfortable, so you have a bit more control as well. So these platforms can definitely be to your advantage. Any questions? Okay. So let's talk about some questions that they may ask. Obviously, there's many different questions they can ask, and it really all depends also beyond these kind of general questions on the industry and the job focused questions. But let's just talk about some of the more popular questions, right? So tell us about yourself. So what does that mean? So tell us about yourself isn't like I grew up on a farm in Alaska and then I went here. It's not a life story. It really is the answer to why you're sitting in that chair or on that, why are you interviewing? So really focus on the experience and education that led you to apply to that opportunity, that led you to be on that interview. So for a lot of students or recent graduates, this really kind of starts with college and what you majored in and what your interests are, and maybe some experience you got that led you to be interested in what you're applying to now. So why are you interested in working for us? So why do you want to work there in that particular position? Now, this is a place that you can also discuss your skills and how they fit in, as well as your interests and experience. So it's not just saying like, you guys are awesome, I really want to work for you. It's also saying, because I'm skilled in this area and have experience, I really think I could bring that to you and I'm a fit. But this also comes back to that research we were talking about. So again, when you're interviewing for a job, you're also interviewing for that organization. So you want them to know why you're interested in working for them. So you may be interviewing for an organization that you actually are really passionate about. You like what their mission is, and maybe you like that they focus on different charities and fundraising, and and have a mission for that. Maybe they're an organization that's focusing to work with a specific population that you're passionate to work with and help. So know, again, why them and why the job and how your skills and experience fit. So describe a challenging situation. So this is a very broad question that could be asked in many, many, many ways. So tell me about a time you faced a problem and how you solved it. It's really a process question. So I say use STAR, which we're going to talk about in a couple of slides, but they really want to know how you problem solve and overcome obstacles. This is key. You want to pick a situation that was truly a challenge, but it doesn't have to be a giant challenge. I think sometimes we get caught in that. It could be a challenging customer. It could be a challenging project, even if it was small. But you just want to show how you are a key part of solving the problem and producing, hopefully, a successful outcome. Now, sometimes you're asked a question about failure as well. You could be asked a question about, tell us about a time there's a challenging situation and you did not succeed. And what did you learn? So you may want to kind of have some examples in your head that you would use for those. Sometimes you're asked about your leadership experience, and we'll talk about that with STAR as well. But just really remember that leadership skills can be demonstrated even if you are not the official leader. We take on leadership roles in different ways, and it doesn't have to be like I was the president of a club or organization. It could be how you led a group in a project, how you led an initiative at your job or internship. So you really want to focus on the actions and initiatives you took and the outcome that resulted from that leadership. So you see what these were? I keep saying outcome. So outcome is really key when you're asked questions like these. And then, of course, another question that you'll be asked, again, it can be asked in different ways. The why should we hire you question, right? So let them know why they need you. So you could recap your skills. Usually this is asked later in the interview. Recap your skills, experience, accomplishments. And genuine interest. Again, genuine interest is really key. And just show your confidence and enthusiasm. I will say it again. It's really important that when you're interviewing for somewhere, I'm not saying you have to be all like, rah, 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 but let them know why are you interested in working for them, that you really have this true interest. Any questions on these? No? Okay. Okay, so what's the STAR thing I'm talking about? So STAR is situation, task, action, and results. And this is really great for interviewing, but really great in general to understand what you've accomplished, especially even in a job when you're asked to report on your accomplishments. This can really be helpful in kind of assessing what you did. So situation and task, that's setting the scene, right? So describing the situation that you're in or the task that you need to accomplish. It should be a specific event or situation where you can provide detail. You want to kind of paint a picture. And you should let them know what you were tasked with, what the project was, what the situation was. And this could really be from anything. It could be from a previous job, from an internship, volunteer, a relevant event, academics, pick what works for you. So then there's action. So what did you do? I'm very emphasizing the you, because even if you are a part of a team, you definitely can talk about the team effort, but you also want to talk about your individual contribution as well. So describe the action you took and be sure to keep the focus on you. And even if you're discussing, again, that group project, again, what did you contribute? Results, how your actions affected the outcome. So this is, I would say, in many interviews, this is where sometimes candidates forget, is that results, that last part, the outcome. What did you accomplish? But beyond what you accomplished, it could also be what you learned. So let's go to the next slide. But any questions? Because there'll be an example here. So again, as I mentioned, I'll be sending the PowerPoint of this, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership skills, right? Because we said this can be used for STAR. So initially, they were setting up what they did last semester. They were working at an internship, and they were their first intern, and they realized they wanted to continue this internship program. So the task was they were asked to create and administer a training for new and incoming interns, because now they're going to be bringing on interns every semester. So then is the action. So this is steps. First, I outlined all the procedures the new interns would need to learn, right? And then next, I created a training agenda. And finally, I facilitated the training to 4 new interns. So really showing this timeline and all the steps that were taken. And this is where sometimes a mistake is made and it's where it's ended, but you want to go to that results. So the training was a huge success, but why was it a success, right? It's easy to say something is a success. It was a success because they did a survey at the end and they rated the program 10 out of 10. And they also rated the communication style of the speaker as excellent. And then because of the success, another department in this organization has now modeled their intern training after that one. So as you can see, it really paints this picture of how they demonstrated these skills. Are there any questions about that? No? Okay. So sometimes we're asked our favorite question about weaknesses. So let's just talk about the other question first, which is strengths, right? So sometimes you're asked a question about what are your greatest strengths, or what strengths do you think will fit most into this position? So the strength question is obviously easier than the weakness question, because it's easy to talk about what you're good at, hopefully, because hopefully before the interview, you have come up with some things that you want to get out to the person interviewing you. I will say that's one of the kind of errors I see with answering the strengths question is just saying your strengths without saying how you have used them or how you could use them. So if you say, my strength is public speaking and, kind of communicating with people throughout the day, you want to show how you've done that or how doing that could help that organization. So really, again, expanding. With weaknesses, the issue is falling into, what weakness do I pick? Oh, what should I say? We don't necessarily like to talk about our weaknesses. So let's kind of talk about how we can do weaknesses. So here's an example, right? So one of my weaknesses is being too detail-oriented. So first, it's like, wow, you have more than one? This is a trap that so many people fall into. I've fallen into it's for some reason, because it's the way they phrase the question. So when they phrase the question as, tell me what one of your weaknesses are, it's easy to just say it back as, well, one of my weaknesses is. But you could say, you know, you can phrase it differently, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. So I have strong tendencies to require the details before moving on with the project. It bothers me when that is not happening. So that's really kind of saying that it's always the case and you will be impatient, that there's no flexibility. With a weakness, you're really trying to talk about something that you're aware of and that you're working on, but that is also not detrimental to the job you're applying to. So with my public speaking example, if I was applying for a job as a teacher who's teaching 5 classes a day, I probably wouldn't say public speaking was my weakness, even if I was a little nervous about it, because that could be pretty detrimental to that job. So how can we improve? Again, you only have to discuss one weakness. You want to use conditional, non-absolute words, and always end with a positive notion. But of course, we're human, so it is okay to talk about the weakness. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and then I'll see if there are questions. So if I had to come up with one, it might be, so that's singular, so one, and it might be non-absolute. It might be somewhat of being too detail-oriented. I seem kind of unconvinced, right, to have tendencies to require details before I move on. I know that is not always the case, but it might be true that it bothers me to some degree when that is not happening. Again, it's that non-absolute, but also that you're just human, right? So things bother us, and maybe this bothers you sometimes. However, at the same time, I'm confident that my tendencies can be one of the important qualities of mine. So it's a positive ending. So this is definitely something that can be practiced a little bit, just to kind of getting used to talking about presenting the weaknesses too. So let me check. Are there any questions? Any questions? No? Okay, sorry. I thought I saw the unmute. Okay. So ending the interview. So definitely they're going to ask you, hopefully, I say definitely, but it should be definite. They're going to ask you for what your questions are. Now, every interview is different. So there may be some interviews where it is a bit more of a conversation and you're kind of able to ask questions throughout. Those you may see a little bit more in the follow-up interviews, which we'll talk about in a minute. But usually, traditionally, there is time at the end for your questions. You really definitely want to ask questions. So you can write some down before the interview so you don't forget. And this is especially much easier with a video or phone interview. So, you know, just write down some questions that you'd want to ask, especially if you're nervous that you just maybe draw a blank at the end and not have questions to ask. But what's nice also about video and phone, especially phone, is that as they're interviewing you, if a question pops in your head, like you can jot it down, and then ask at the end too. You know, these questions should be thoughtful questions to help make the interview more of a dialogue. So your first question should not be, what's the next step in the process, or when will I hear? Like that should not be that question you lead off with when they ask you if you have questions. So you really want to kind of think about working there, about what their role is, about the details of the job, about the organization. That's why maybe writing some down before can help. You know, and you can ask about the team, you can ask about current challenges, what they enjoy about their work. And of course, as I mentioned, questions that just may have naturally arose from the interview. Your last question can be about the interview process if they haven't addressed it. Hopefully they will address it, but if they haven't, you can definitely ask, what are the next steps in the interview process? And then they would let you know. Any questions? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about after the interview. You do want to send a thank you email that day. Try to send it to all interviewers interviewers, as well as the person, if there was somebody else who coordinated the interview, even if they didn't interview. The email, I mean, this thank you can be quick. It's not as long as a cover letter. And it really just kind of reconfirms your interest in the position and the organization. It also can give you the chance to share additional information that was not covered during the interview. And it can help you kind of connect something to the interview. You know, you may have had a brief discussion about something in the interview that really excited you, and you can let them know that, right? And it really just further demonstrates your communication skills. But really, the key is that reconfirming your interest, because I think there's this misconception in the interviewee relationship that the person interviewing has all the power, but that is not true, because if they have decided to interview you, they are interested in you. They are investing their time to interview you. And they are also on their side hoping that you are interested in them. And if they liked your interview, want to stay for the next process of the interview. This is really key. So really reconfirming that interest to say, okay, they are interested. You know, and then as far as just like after the interview, you can follow up, you know, especially if you're directed to, or if they stated follow-up date has passed. So meaning, you know, if they said like, we're going to get in contact with you in 2 weeks, either way, but now it's 3 weeks and you have not heard from them, and this is after you sent your thank yous and everything, you can definitely follow up with that. Any questions? No? Okay. Okay, so we're just going to talk about next round interviews. So the hope is that, you know, especially if this is for a job, let's say versus an internship, most likely, I'm not saying it's always, but oftentimes there's going to be more than one round of interviews. So for those second or third round interviews, those can definitely be different than the first round. So the first thing really is, you may get more in-depth questions, and you will, but also be prepared to answer some of the same questions you answered on the first interview. You may also answer the same questions you're asked that day if you have a couple of different interviews. Now, this, in my head, I'm thinking traditionally more of those in-person interviews, but this could be the same with video or phone as well, where they may kind of treat it like a day of interviewing with different people. So really think about what you didn't say in the first interview and what you would like to expand on. So what I would recommend is whenever you have a first interview, immediately after, just write down some notes, things that like, oh, I forgot to say that. So, you know, so you're starting to prepare for either a second interview with that organization or another interview with another organization. But it's good to kind of make those notes after the first. You may interact with people who are not formally interviewing you. This is like what I mentioned before, even for the first, but you're always on the interview. You do want to ask more thoughtful questions, not just about the job, but about the organization, especially if you're having the opportunity to interview with different people, maybe people people outside of who you may be directly reporting to. If you can, if it's, again, kind of a more formal next round interview, try to get an agenda for the day so you know who you will be interviewing, and then you could do some research on those people. You could look on LinkedIn, look on the website, learn a little bit more about them. I would say fit comes into play more here. So often the first round interview is really looking at the skills and experience, and yeah, they are thinking of fit. But definitely for next round interviews, they're really seeing, are you a fit for the culture of the organization, of the office, for what they value as an organization. And that, you know, that's something that does become key. And follow-up is key again. You never stop the follow-up, even if you're still interacting with people for the first interview and your next round interview, you still want to follow up, and you want to follow up with everybody. So I'm going to open it up to see if you have questions in a moment. I am going to just share a little bit of information about our office, and then I'll stop the recording, and then I'll see if there are questions. So obviously, you can reach out to the Career Development Center to help with interviewing. We could do a range of things. We could do a full mock interview. So let's say right now we do that like over Zoom, where we have a mock interview, and then we kind of go over what was said. We could talk more about interview tips or talk more about interview questions. As I mentioned, we do offer Interview Stream as a resource. We can really help with any of this. And then obviously beyond the interview too. So job searching, internship search, career exploration, and all of that. So we're here all summer, and you can make appointments with us remotely. We can do phone and video appointments right now, but you can contact us, any day, Monday through Friday, with any questions. So I'm going to stop.